in the original little preview that I wrote for Carol when she invited me to do this, she said, just do a little bit of write-up, and I said, well, Tioga County, including Candor and all the rest of it, has changed hands so much that at least 6 countries have laid claim to the land that we're sitting on. And actually, they talk about the Iroquois being 6 nations, so if you count that, 6 that would run it up to 11 instead of 6, because I'm just counting the natives as 1. And all the other foreign countries that got involved, we'll get to them, we'll run down the list and so on. And then all the changes, 4 states claimed this area at one time or another, which, and then we get into the counties, and well, we'll get to that. It's confusing enough without trying to go over too much all at once. So let's start. Well, we'll of course the last 5 centuries have seen a lot of changes here, and of course the first people that claimed this area were the indigenous natives to the area. I'm reluctant to use the word Indians, and of course I don't know how Candor is dealing with it, but Owego is getting hammered about using the word Indian. I don't know why they're upset, because India has nothing to do with anybody that ever lived here anyway. The entire word Indians came about as a big mistake. It was through the ignorance of the early explorers who didn't know where they were going and didn't know where they had arrived when they got here. Some of them weren't even sure that they were thousands and thousands and thousands of miles from India, which is where a lot of them thought they were, which was one of the reasons why we ended up calling the native indigenous people Indians. They kind of missed the mark. They were only about 15,000 miles off. But the name stuck. And I'm even reluctant to call them American Indians, because, again, that word America has nothing to do with the indigenous people that lived here. That was not what they called this place. To be perfectly honest, I don't know what the natives did call this continent, or even if they had a name for this continent. It was just the place they were. It's kind of like this planet doesn't really have a name. We just call it Earth. But all the other planets have names. You know, as a matter of fact, right now, we should all stop and run outside, because I understand that, what is it, Venus and Jupiter
They're
are
right there.
lined up
We lost them in the parking lot.
right outside. Well, not right outside, they're quite a distance. You can see them from right outside, and I gather this is the closest they have been in a long, long time. But those planets have names. We don't know what anybody that is native to those planets calls them, but I doubt that if there's anybody living on Jupiter that they call it a place Jupiter. And we don't really have a name. The Earth, not even capital E, it's just small e, Earth. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the dirt in the front yard or whether you're talking about the entire planet, it's the same word. So, I don't know that the original natives to this continent had a name for the place. But some guy over in Europe, and I gather his name was Amerigus Vespucci, is the one who came up with some sort of an attempt of a map of what was here, which let those explorers know that, no, they hadn't gotten to India or China or anywhere else that side of the world. They got here. And guess it could be worse. Instead of calling the place America, we could be calling it Vespucci. Somehow that just doesn't. Where are you from? I'm a Vespuccian. Okay. Well, anyway, so and of course, even among the indigenous people, we tend to think of the Iroquois as being the ones because they were the last ones here that we kind of took it away from. But they weren't the first ones here. There had been, over the centuries, I've heard a lot of names tossed out, Algonquins, Lenape, and so on. By the way, the natives themselves didn't use any of those terms to call themselves. They had their own names for themselves. And some of them were quite elaborate, and I'm not going to do them any disservices by trying to pronounce those names myself. Trust me, the Indians did not call themselves Indians. They did not call themselves Iroquois, and they did not use names like Mohawk, Tioga, Seneca, Tuscarora. Those are all names that were applied to them by people that couldn't pronounce what the natives themselves called themselves. So anyway, they were all the original occupants and owners of all this area. But from the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus in 1492, from then until the American Revolution, European monarchs just loved having land in the New World. One, didn't cost them anything. They just sent over their explorers, and for the price of a ship and a few sailors, they could claim half the world. And they did. Pretty much everything between Europe and China was claimed by somebody or other from Europe at various times. It was land that they'd never seen, never were going to see, and didn't pay anything for. And so they were, hey, we can take advantage of this, we can scour the place, we can remove anything that we can find of value over there, bring it back here, and use the land for all sorts of purposes. We can make ourselves important by getting loyalty from people by saying, ah, yes, Duke, so-and-so, have a slice of that continent over there as a gift from me, as a token of my friendship and as kind of a thank you for the $12 billion worth of gold or whatever that you've added to my treasury. Mm-hmm. So it was exploited for national, if not personal gain. All of these countries, Spain, the Dutch, the French, and the English, all had some connection to the area that is now Tioga County. The Spanish were among the first explorers, but their presence in this area is actually really only a rumor. It's been said that Spanish explorers, perhaps from De Soto or Pizarro's teams, somehow traveled back in the 1500s to the north, visiting a large Native American village called Carantuan, which is near the junction of the Susquehanna and Chemung rivers, right on the border between modern Waverly, New York, and Sayre, Pennsylvania. Well, the part of it that was in New York isn't there anymore, but it was at the time. Today, because of that rumor, the location of that Native American settlement is commonly referred to as Spanish Hill. And as I said, the part of Spanish Hill that was in Tioga County isn't there anymore. It's part of the highway, but it was there. And so that is a tenuous, but at least somewhat suggested connection between the Spanish and
Tioga County. You notice I didn't mention Portugal, even though a lot of those early explorers were Portuguese, but they never got this far north. We don't know that the Spanish got this far north, but that term Spanish Hill had to come from somewhere, and it's been called Spanish Hill. Nobody remembers how long, but hundreds of years. So whether there were any Spanish there or not, your guess is as good as mine. We have no proof one way or the other. There is, however, evidence that a French explorer by the name of Etienne Brulé, or in English, Steve Brule, who was a part of Samuel de Champlain's team. There's a name you've heard, de Champlain. We have a lake named for him that's a bit of a ways off from here, but still part of our state. And they actually did visit Caranchawan, Spanish Hill, in the early 1600s. Etienne Brulé was the first non-native person to set foot in this area that we can actually kind of document. De Champlain made it possible for the French to claim much of North America for France, including Canada and New York, the state, and so on. So that brought the French, and we know that at least one guy was here, and he didn't come alone. He had a group of other of de Champlain's men with him. Then Henry Hudson came along and sailed up the river that was named after him, also in the early 1600s, and the Dutch began settling an area that now includes Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and their colonies were primarily in the eastern region. They were making plans for western expansion, and they claimed a lot of territory, including this place here, as well as a lot of the land even further west. The English changed everything. By 1674, they had forced the Dutch government out of North America, although there were still Dutch settlers scattered all over the place, including the Susquehanna River Valley and even further west in what is now New York and Pennsylvania. By 1763, the English had won what we refer to as the French and Indian War, and the French were forced to abandon most of the territory east of the Mississippi River, at least in an official capacity. However, there were still French settlers remaining in the area, and they didn't all just pack up and leave. English kings used land grants to raise money, promote loyalty. In the early 1600s, several grants were made based on rough guesses as to land layout. At this point yet, there really wasn't much in the way of accurate maps of anything much beyond the coastline and maybe a couple hundred miles in from the coastline. And even the maps of the coastline, well, if you looked at them, you'd say, yeah, but it's not really quite like that. And they did the best they could with what information and skills they had. So, 1606, King James I of England granted land to a group at Plymouth, England. This grant gave all the land between the 40th and 48th parallels from the East Coast on forever, including land that is now Tioga County. In 1628, some of the Plymouth grant was transferred as the Massachusetts Bay Grant, again, including local land. In 1664, King Charles II granted land to the Duke of York and Albany. And again, it was from 2 spots, between 2 spots on the East Coast, going out there forever. After the American Revolution, it was discovered that a lot of these grants had given overlapping claims to the same land, to the same different people. By 1787, those claims now belonged to different states. Just south of the local area, disputes over territory led to actual bloody fighting because of conflicting claims of Pennsylvania and Connecticut, because both of them claimed the land. The Connecticut deal goes all the way back to the Dutch, because it was the Netherlands that originally settled Connecticut somehow. And so they claimed territory just south of us, along with Pennsylvania. As I said, that actually led to some bloody fighting down there, known as the Yankee Pennamite Wars. The Yankees were the Connecticut people, we heard the term Connecticut Yankee, and the Pennsylvanians were the Pennamites. And that got nasty, and that went on down there. That was not just a short fight. That went on for close to 50 years. That was not something that happened overnight. They actually had 3, there are 3 Pennamite Wars, Yankee Pennamite Wars. But that's a whole other story. I have some information on it if you really want to know, but that's even more complicated than local, and I think it's enough to try to burden you with what happened on the north side of the border. Speaking of which, the border between the states of New York and Pennsylvania, oh, it looked great. It had this wonderful line on a map. Well, I don't know about you, but when I go out walking in the woods, I don't see any lines there. And the map, well, that's just not much help when you're walking in the woods. Okay, yeah, there's a line separating New York and Pennsylvania. Prove it. Show me. And so that even there, as a matter of fact, both Pennsylvania and Connecticut claimed substantial amounts of what is now New York State. As a matter of fact, practically all of the western part of New York State was claimed by Connecticut because of the Dutch and that heritage. They had a ton of territory. So the ones that lost out, of course, were the Indians, or, well, forgive me for using that term and calling them that, but it's one that everybody recognizes, even though it's a ridiculously lame term. So Sullivan sent his army up, and there were actually 2 armies. During the Revolution, 1779, there'd been some problems. The British and some of their Iroquois allies had been causing a lot of problems out on the frontier. And one of the problems was down in Pennsylvania, where there was a substantial settlement of Connecticut people in the area that is now modern day Wilkes-Barre and what we call the Wyoming Valley down there. So Sullivan was sent by Washington to take care of that problem. Sullivan and Clinton left from 2 different areas, and they met at a place that ever since has been known as Union. You've probably heard of it. It's just a few miles up the road heading toward Binghamton, and it's still called the town of Union even today. And that name came because that was where the Clinton Army and the Sullivan Army met. They came to Owego afterwards. After they met, they intended to go back to Sullivan's headquarters, which he had established at Tioga Point, now known as Athens, Pennsylvania. But when they got to Owego, it rained and rained and rained and rained. So they stayed here. and they stayed long enough for things to get, well, fortunately, when they got here, before the rain started, they managed to burn the Indian village that was here completely to the ground. And they burned all the Indians' crops as well. The area where the village of Owego was located now was not where the Indians lived. They were smarter than that. They wouldn't build on a floodplain. So that was where they did all their farming. Like the Egyptians, they benefited greatly from the annual flooding of the Susquehanna River, and it was magnificent farmland. The area that is now known as Kanawani, which is on the river side of Front Street across from the fairgrounds, the area that is the fairgrounds, and the flat land that is affectionately known by the people that live there as the Flats in Owego, right on up, including the area where all of the school buildings are now, almost up to about where Turner's Bridge is. That was among the only land in the area that was not heavily forested. Everything else was pretty heavily forested. But that area was pretty well flat, and it was a grassy plain where the Indians did all their farming. And it was a magnificent field full of crops. The Indian, or the Sullivan's group burned all that before the rain started. And then when they had camp here, after they burned all the Indians' crops in the Indian village, they didn't have anything to eat while they stayed here an extra couple of days. Not planning ahead real well. But anyway, they did eventually go on with the overall thing, which allowed the United States, when it came into existence a few years later, after we won the revolution and established a government, that was when our government decided to take a look and straighten out all these border disputes and all the land conflicts and so on. So they claimed all this land for the United States, even though that there were still a few settlers here from other countries, but they were absorbed into the population. So the government stepped in, and there were judges and lawyers and all kinds of things. And actually, on the New York side of the border, they're pretty good about it. They took everything into consideration, and they awarded all of the land north of the border once they had a pretty good idea that there was a border somewhere between New York and Pennsylvania, and they had a pretty good idea of where it was, maybe not physically, but at least on the maps. So they decided after this, well, we're going to fight it out with Massachusetts, and the lawyers got involved, and they did that. And when all was said and done, they gave all the land to Massachusetts. But there was a catch to it. All that land that Massachusetts was given ownership of was in New York State. Okay. So Massachusetts decided they did not want to be governed by some other state, so they put the land up for sale, except for a couple other little claims that have been involved there. Okay, the one big exception in the local land arrangement was a tract of land that had been purchased directly from the local native tribal leaders by a fellow named James McMaster with the help of Amos Draper. Draper was a bit of an itinerant trader who had gotten to know the few Indians that hung around after Sullivan Clinton. And he negotiated a deal that McMaster was going to buy this land. You might say, that sounds a little kind of sketchy, but look at it this way. The Indians at this point really didn't have much to lose. they were going to get kicked out of the area anyway. They weren't going to be allowed to stay here because the settlers were coming in at that point by, well, the wagon load, I guess, at the time, but they were coming in by the hundreds, if not the thousands. So the Indians didn't have much to lose, so they thought, let's get something out of it anyway. So they sold a nice big batch of land, and Amos Draper negotiated the deal, and they actually got it on paper, and all the local tribal chiefs signed the paper and the document, and there was a translation made available. And when the court got that, they looked at it, well, all right, and it stood up in court. So to his credit, McMaster gave most of the land to create the village of Owego, and that's pretty much how the modern village of Owego came into existence. And it was never owned by Massachusetts. However, all the land that had been owned by Massachusetts, and we're talking, well, more than 500,000 acres. Just about everything from the Delaware River over, to the other side of Corning was bought up by speculators. Massachusetts just wanted to get out from under it. They were afraid they might have to pay taxes to New York or something like that. So they got out from under it just as fast as they could. So they sold all that land to speculators. And I think we can probably update this here. I think we've got something. I'll change it again a little bit. All right. By 1791, they broke the area up into counties. And that was all of Western New York. And as I said, everything that shows on this map as Tioga County was pretty much taken up by the Massachusetts and sold off. The stuff that was on the east side, the land between Owego Creek and Shenango River, is known as the Boston Purchase, and that was 230,000 acres. The western part of what is shown on there is Tioga County, everything from Owego Creek west, as far as Corning, from the Susquehanna River north to the Finger Lakes, 363,000 acres, was sold to two guys by the name of John Watkins and Royal Flint. And then this land was also sold to prospective settlers. They peddled it. And in 1803, they sent as their land agents down here a family by the name of Pumpelly. John Pumpelly and his four sons came down originally as surveyors and land agents. And when settlers wanted to come into this area, they represented the speculators and they sold off the land, at least the land on the Boston Purchase side of Owego Creek. There were some other people on the west bank, but in any case, the land eventually was divided up and sold. There was one other major land grant that had affected Tioga County. Way back when the British were being concerned and the revolution was about to begin, they had given a grant in 1775 to a Cox family, C-O-X-E. They got 30,000 acres between the Susquehanna River and the Pennsylvania line that included most of what is now the area known as Appalincoln and the town of Nichols, at least the Lounsbury area of it. A strange aspect of this grant is that the Cox family traded, the original grant that they were given was land in the Carolinas and the Bahamas, which they traded to get land up here. Now you might say, were they out of their mind? They gave up the Bahamas and the Carolinas for Appalachian? But it makes more sense than you might think, because there was already a major set of occupants in the Bahamas, known affectionately as pirates. They were not nice, and you didn't want to mess with them. Something else that they had in the Bahamas and especially the Carolinas that Appalachian didn't really have, that was mosquitoes and crocodiles. So maybe they weren't so dumb after all. But again, the Cox family, they sold off a lot of the land. Well, anyway, before the American Revolution, this local area was part of something called Tryon County in the British colony of New York, which included most of Western New York. After the war and the new state of New York, Tryon County was renamed after heroic General Montgomery, who had led the attacks on the British in Canada. Over time, as population spread and grew, Montgomery County was split up, leaving just a tiny little area on the Mohawk River. In 1791, a large Tioga County was among the group of counties broken off Montgomery. Tioga County, in turn, saw divisions continue until 1836. Parts of the original Tioga County were taken off to help form Onondaga County in 1794, Shenango County in 1798, Broome County in 1806, Tompkins County in 1822, and Chemung County in 1836. The Onondaga portion that was taken off first in 1794 was subsequently broken into other pieces that became counties. Here in the southern tier, Tioga County became known as the mother of counties. Now, the confusion is hardly begun. It's going to go on. Okay. Gotta go back to the reading again because it's confusing. Okay, when Tioga County was first formed, there were 5 towns in Tioga County, from west to east. They were the town of Chemung, the town of Owego, the town of Union, the town of Shenango, and the town of Jericho. Chemung, Owego, and Shenango were old Indian names. Jericho was biblical, obviously, and Union, of course, as I said earlier, was named for the fact that that's where the armies of General Sullivan and General Clinton first met and joined together in 1779. Now, they began to break things up. As the counties separated and became different counties, the modern Tioga County towns, the town of Tioga separated from the town of Union in 1800. The town of Spencer separated from the old town of Owego in 1806. Town of Berkshire in 1808 separated from the old town of Tioga. Candor separated from the town of Spencer in 1811. Newark Valley separated from the town of Berkshire in 1823. Barton separated from the new town of Tioga in 1824. And Nichols also in 1824 separated from the new town of Tioga. And Richford separated from the town of Berkshire in 1831. Now you notice in there I talked about Old Town and New Town. Some confusion had been caused from 1800 to 1813 when what is now the town of Owego now was named the town of Tioga. And what is now the town of Tioga was originally called the town of Owego. That meant the settlement of the village of Owego was in Tioga, and the settlement of Tioga was in Owego. To further complicate matters, the original town of Tioga, which at the time included Owego, Newark Valley, Berkshire, and Richford, when Broome County separated in 1806, that all went with them. So that what is now Owego, Newark Valley, Berkshire, and Richford was in Broome County from 1806 till 1821. While it was there, part of Broome County, they didn't move it, it's just while it was under the claim of Broome County, they decided at some point that, you know, this is confusing, let's switch these names so that the town of Tioga was no longer in Broome County, it was in Tioga County, and the town of Owego was still in Broome County, but it was now the town of Owego. And of course, eventually Newark Valley, Berkshire, and Richford all separated and became their own towns. Anyway, then in 1822, Broome County decided, you know what, it's more of a headache. They can have it back. And Tioga County reclaimed the towns of Owego, Newark Valley, Berkshire, and Richford. We got them back. Now, while those towns were part of Broome County, the county seat for Tioga County had, for a time, been Elmira, but it had moved to Spencer around 1811. So Spencer, remember, half the county was not Tioga County, it was Broome County. So Spencer was kind of centrally located in what was left, and so Spencer became the county seat of Tioga County. When they switched these towns of Owego, Newark Valley, Berkshire, and Richford back to Tioga County, then Owego became the county seat. Spencer kind of wanted to keep the county seat, but very conveniently, supposedly at the hands of some vicious Owego people, the courthouse at Spencer burned down very mysteriously. That helped that decision along a little bit. And then finally, the last territory, and 1836, Chemung County was separated from Tioga County, and the borders have pretty much remained unchanged, and I think that's pretty well laid out on there. So, have I succeeded in getting everybody drastically confused? Do you know where you are? We're in Candor. Candor was always part of Tioga County. They didn't get shifted over to Broome County or to Chemung County or up to Onondaga, later Tompkins County. So, and I brought some maps along, and going to give you the chance to wander around and take a look at them. I'll kind of, they're not really in order, But part of that was deliberate so that we don't get a whole mob at one spot. You can variety of things. This is an 1855 map of Tioga County. It's highly detailed. Every structure that was standing in Tioga County in 1855 is on here. We also have some village maps on here. There's a little village map of Candor, Spencer, Tioga Center, Newark Valley, Halsey Valley. South? Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, one of the things I discovered is that place names change constantly. And doing research, and you see a reference to this place or that place, and it took me a long time, and there's still places. I don't know where the heck they are. I hear the name, and I gather from some of the folks out here that I was talking to a little earlier, neither do you. Some of you do, some of you don't. I remember years ago, I was collecting local postcards, as I still do, and more about that in a little bit. But I got a postcard of a train wreck at a little place called, where now? I had it in my head a minute ago. It's not on the maps here. Snyder. I know a few of you know where Snyder is, or was, but it drove me crazy. I knew it was in Tioga County. And I thought, well, where is Snyder? I started looking at maps. Do you know, Snyder has always been a pretty well-kept secret. It does exist, but it took me a long time before I finally found a map that showed Snyder. And Carolyn, tell them where Snyder is.
Snyder Station Road is off of Gridleyville. It's West Candor Road.
There you go.
We kind of, from the 1950s, and I was always disappointed when they changed the name of the road. Because there was a station right up there and the railroad tracks ran across.
Yep.
So that's where it is.
It was, there was actually a railroad station at Snyder. Of course, you know those things they put up for the kids out in the country, that their house is a long way from the road, for the kids to wait for the school buses, kind of a little shed. That was the Snyder.
And if you want to know where that was, I don't know if you know where Wilders live, Benjamin's now. There was a big farm there. It's across from the road, and it's down over the bank, and that's where the station was.
Snyder has the distinction of being the smallest railroad station in the history of time. It was even smaller than the one for Hiawatha Island. You might ask, Hiawatha Island? How the heck do they have a railroad station? It was on the mainland, and there was a little ferry that ran from the Hiawatha Island Railroad Depot over to the island. So even though the name on the little depot was Hiawatha, you weren't really there yet. You had a little boat ride before you got there. That was the second smallest depot in Tioga County. And most of the rest of them were about what you'd expect for railroad depots. Okay. So as I said, I encountered a lot of this kind of thing when I was doing early research. This is an 1868 map of the town of Candor, which includes, of course, Candor, South Candor, Gridleyville, Snyder's not on here, West Candor, Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, although that was over in the town, that was in the town of Candor. You know where Wright is? I didn't think so. Prospect Valley isn't on here, but East Candor is. How about Perryville? Perryville in the town of Candor. Okay, well, you're gonna look at the map in just a bit. This is another one. I don't know the exact date of this one, but again, it's pretty early and it's got places on here that I have to admit I never heard of. How about Roadville in the town of Candor? Roadville. Roadville.
I think that's, trying to think of the name of the road.
Well, anyway, it's halfway between West Candor and Straits Corners, out in the middle of godforsaken
Yes.
no place.
And I only know that because I've seen it on the map.
Yep. What's that?
If people remember where the Scango farm was, that was Roadville.
Okay. Milt would know. So anyway, that's on this map. This next one here, and I left it at the index page, but this is small. It's only, I think, 6 pages. And this is a Sanborn map. And if you know what a Sanborn map is, this is the 1908 Candor Sanborn map. Sanborn map was made for insurance companies. And it lists every structure, what it was made out of, and the exact dimensions of it. And when I say every structure, that includes barns, sheds, outhouses, what have you. And so I've got the one here for Candor. I also have, although I didn't put them out, Newark Valley, Nichols, and Owego. Don't have any from Waverly, but I'd like to. The next here was this set of maps was an attempt at one time to come up with an easy way of finding places called the clock system, where all your towns had a group of circles around them, and so that you could assign. It was helpful if you knew somebody that lived out in the country that didn't have an address, maybe their road didn't even have a name, but you could check on this circular grid to find out where places were. Earlier, we talked about Cox's patent. This is a map of Cox's patent. Here is another map, 1868, of Candor. And by this point, Candor really was pretty much just one community. But if you look, you see it's a little skinny in the middle, and because originally Candor was 2 separate places. And you can tell when you look at this map that it was the population areas were kind of divided up. One was south of the Cataton Creek, the other was north of the Cataton Creek, and eventually they both grew enough that they joined together and formed one community. But originally Candor was 2 places. And we've got Wilseyville, Catatonk, and Weltonville on here. This is an early puzzle that somebody made by cutting up. This is Tioga and Broome County, and this map was made, this map dates to, I think, the 1870s. This one, this is kind of an unusual one. This is a map of Tioga County before Chemung County was taken off, but after half of Broome County was given back to us. So this is during that short period of time. This map's from 1828, and it shows all of Tioga County when Chemung was part of it. Okay, now, I'm going to open up for questions, but one other little thing I'm going to do. I mentioned earlier that I have a bit of a postcard collection, and I recently added several thousand more cards to my collection. It was already the largest collection in the county, but I added about 1,000 more cards. This stack, according to the source I got them from, these were all in with Candor. They're all people. I'm going to lay them out on a table, and you're welcome to take a look. And if you recognize anybody, that was my great grandpa. Please feel free. I'm going to put some pencils there, and on the back gently, I mean, don't engrave it, just lightly write down any information that you can give me on the back, and I'll spread these out on a table, and you can look at them. The collection that I just got fairly recently, some of you may have heard about it, was Joan Cook's collection. Joan Cook was the lady that did all of the Tioga State Bank calendars for about 40 years. And I still, throughout that 40-year period, I still had more old postcard views than she did. And she still came to me almost every year and borrowed a few of my cards for the calendar. But she built up a collection of about, probably 100,000 cards. They weren't all local. I managed to get the local ones after she passed away. I bought them. They weren't given to me. But the rest of the collection, I really wasn't that interested in and couldn't afford them anyway. So all the rest of them, the holiday cards, the foreign cards, the cards from Nebraska, Louisiana, and so on, those, they went to the far winds. But I wanted to keep all the local ones local. So I know of 2 more local collections out there, but I think I already have everything that's in either of them now, between what I already had plus this group. But these are all people, supposedly Candor people. I don't know. So I will put maybe on that table over by you, Cal. And there's a couple of pencils there. Okay. Now, if anybody has any questions or comments about all this, I hope I didn't get it too confusing. But you can understand now why I tried to read most of it, because all the dates and all the separations and so on. But if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. And if not, if you want to come up here and browse at these maps, feel free. And they are pretty much here. And Lars, I gave you a copy of some of the smaller ones that are here. I think there's also a smaller version of this in the back. That'll help, and that can go, Candor can keep that afterwards. All righty. Thank you.